Inside my sandbox game in Unity, I've set up a couple of ramps, ramp objects that were objects that I created in Cinema 4D, and then I brought them into my assets folder. So I have a models folder inside of my assets folder, and I dragged those ramps into my folder. I had saved them as FBX files. If we go into preview and just kind of roll the marble around a little bit, you can see I've got these ramp objects that I can go up, and well, if I made it to the other side, I could go down that other ramp. So what we are going to do is in Cinema 4D, we're going to create a UV mesh in which we're going to be able to create some sort of a texture, specific texture for these ramps. So what I'd like to do is have these ramps look a little bit like roadways. They're going to have kind of an asphalt color, like a dark gray color, and then I'd like to have some yellow stripes going down the center, kind of like a road. So I'm going to show you a workflow for doing that. First thing we want to do is make sure that our object is open in Cinema 4D, and we should have converted that to an editable object. So mine is already an editable object, and you can see by this little triangle here with the nodes on it that it means editable. If you need to convert yours to an editable object, just press this button here that says Make Editable. So mine is grayed out because mine already is in that state. So that's really important that you have it as editable. There's various layout modes. So what we're going to do in order to create a custom texture for this is we're going to sort of like unwrap the polygons. It's almost as if we're unwrapping or we're flattening out a package, like a box or something like that. So I'm going to go into the UV edit mode. And inside UV edit, we have a couple of windows here that we can adjust. And what I'm interested in is this UV map area over here. So we need to be in one of these object edit modes. It could be points or edges or polygons. It really doesn't matter, but I'm going to do polygons. And when we select one of these, we get an option to select a projection, which is, for example, if I select cubic, I see that I have my polygons or planes of my object sort of mapped out before me, but they do not look proportional. And this is what we want. We want our planes or polygons to be proportional. So I'm going to choose box. And that makes everything proportional. So we have like this back part of the ramp, and we can see that that's more of a rectangle. We've got the side. And notice how when I select these little planes here on my UV map, they correspond to they also select the planes on my 3D projection as well. So what I could just leave this the way it is and work with it this way. But what I'm planning on doing is creating this. I said I was going to create a yellow stripe, and I want the yellow stripe to go up the top part of this ramp. And we need to determine which of these squares, which is the top and which is the bottom. So if I select this one, it does select the top part of the ramp on the 3D model, so I know that this is the top of my ramp. And what I want my stripe to do is I want it to wrap around so that I just want the texture to go around to the back as well. So basically what I'm going to have is the stripe going, it's going to kind of wrap around the top, the back, the bottom, and then there's a very small little very narrow or low rectangle right here. So if I leave my projection like this, I'm going to have a hard time getting that stripe, when I paint that in Photoshop, I'm going to have a hard time getting it to align perfectly. Like what I want to do is I kind of want to move these together so that they're adjoining each other, and then I'll have an easier time creating the stripe that flows from one surface to another. So I'm going to go into this UV transform mode, and if I'm in there, I can select these various surfaces. And so I know this is the top surface, so what I'm going to do is just select that and move that down. And if I zoom in really far, I can see here's my really narrow edge in the front, that very low rectangle, and I'm just going to move this down and align it to match up, to meet right up. I'm zooming in as far as I can by scrolling with the click wheel on my mouse, and I'm just going to match that up. All right, so next thing I'm going to do is take this back rectangle for the back of the ramp, and I'm going to move that down as well. And I'm going to zoom in as far as I can go so that I can line this up with the bottom part of the ramp. And what I can also do is I can change the, I can actually modify this so that I have more workspace here. So I can zoom in even a little bit closer. And I'm just going to match that up as closely as I can. If it's not perfect, don't worry about it. But I'm trying to get mine as close as possible because I'm going to have this stripe, and I want to make sure that as it wraps around the object that it isn't misaligned. All right, so now on these sides, I could just leave these alone because I'm not planning on wrapping any graphic around like from the top to the side. But just for efficiency's sake, I think in terms of like painting this thing when I get into Photoshop, I'm going to select each one of these and I'm going to hold the Shift key. And then as I hold the Shift key, I want to kind of hover over one of these corners, and you see that little kind of circular arrows. So I'm holding Shift, I've got my circular arrows, and then I'm clicking and dragging, and you can see that as I hold Shift, when I let go of Shift, you can see the number of degrees changing, and it's kind of not real precise. You know, I've got like 2.1 degrees, but if I hold Shift, it locks it to 5-degree increments. So that way, if I want to change this to be 90 degrees, I'm going to start over, Shift, and then just drag, and it's locking to 5-degree increments, and now I have mine turned to 90 degrees. Let me do the same with the other one. So I want to make sure that the straight part, or the square part of the ramp is aligning with the edge of the bottom. So this is the bottom of the ramp, this is the top of the ramp. If we look at our rectangles, we can see that this 90-degree angle, it kind of aligns with the bottom here. So I want to make sure I get that right. Let me rotate both of these. So I have them both at 90. I'm going to select both, and I'm going to drag them down. Let me go ahead and just position one of these. I'm zooming in so that I can really get in there and align this with that edge. All right, and now the other one I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to move that in. All right, and that's pretty close. Adjust this a little bit. Okay. For my purposes, for what I'm going to be doing, it's a relatively simple material, and so this is going to work fine. What I can also do is select all of these objects, and one of the things we have to do is make sure that we do not miss picking up this little really narrow rectangle in there. So I'm going to select all of my objects. I'm holding Shift as I select so that I'm adding to my selection as I go. And then I'm just going to move this and center it inside of this area here. All right, so I have my UV mesh. It's a, I would call it a like a projection of the 3D object into 2D space. All right, now I'm going to go over to my my 3D paint layout. And in the 3D paint layout, what I want to do is create my UV mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and click the paint setup wizard. I want to make sure that my cube is selected, and it is. It's got the little green check mark. If I had several objects here, I would make sure that I select the cube. Choose next. I'm going to, if your recalculate UVs is checked, I'm going to uncheck mine because I did some customization of my UV map. And then I'm also, yours might be at 0 for minimum, this first box minimum width, but I am going to make a square texture, so I changed mine to 1024. The default was 1024 for the height, so we want this to be a square. And then just go ahead and click Finish, and then close that out. Now we can go back to our UV edit mode. And now you can see we have this material here. So what I want to do is make a layer with my map, so that I have the outlines of my polygons on a separate layer. Because if I paint outside of this layer, nothing is being painted on my object. So this just is sort of nothing going on over here. But if I paint inside of here, inside of these outlines, I can see, okay, I'm painting on the object. So it's important that we have these this map, the contours of our object, so we know where we're painting. So I'm going to create a separate layer for the map. I'm going to click on the UVW tag, and then I'm going to go to Layer and choose Create UV Mesh Layer. And if we look at our material down here, and we, after we do that, and we look at the material and we expand this by clicking on the arrow, I've got what looks like a clear or a transparent, I should say a transparent layer, and that's the layer that holds our UV map, or our outlines for our map. And then the other layer is showing what we're painting on. All right, so what we want to do is save this so that we can open it up in Photoshop. We want to save our material with the layers. Go to File, so we're going to our texture editor, and not this file next to Cinema 4D, but this file for this particular window, or this menu for this particular window. Go to File, go to Save Texture As, and we're just going to leave it as a TIFF file. We'll hit OK. Now we can rename our texture, but I'm going to just leave it at the default. And it's saving inside of our folder for our Cinema 4D models. This is not inside of my Unity project folder. This is a completely separate folder. And I'm saving it in the same folder where I have my my ramp model. So I'm working on ramp 2. So let's go ahead and hit save.